Cop grabs black woman at boarding gate freezes when she orders him to stand down. A sudden piercing shout shattered the quiet hum at Gate 14 of John F. Kennedy International Airport, drawing every eye away from phones and waiting area conversations. A tall uniformed cop gripped a young black woman's arm, his face twisted in anger, while she stood, resolute, refusing to be shoved around. In that moment of tension, amid travelers hurrying to catch flights, and the overhead announcements droning her voice rose above the chaos. "Stand down," she commanded, surprising everyone, especially the officer. It felt like the air itself stilled in shock. No one could have predicted how this standoff would ignite a battle for justice. Michaela Brown woke that morning in her tiny Bronx apartment with a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. A glance at the clock told her she'd overslept by 30 minutes. She had meticulously planned her day to catch her early afternoon Delta Airlines flight from John F. Kennedy International Airport. She needed every minute to navigate the subway deal with airport security and get to her gate without a moment to spare. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mother in Atlanta. "Sweetie, please hurry. Your cousin says Grandma might need another surgery." That quick text carried the weight of urgency. Michaela's grandmother had always been a pillar in her life, supportive, loving, and steadfast in times of crisis. The thought of losing her pushed a lump into Michaela's throat. Despite the tension building inside her, Michaela hurried through her routine. She shoved clothes and toiletries into a carry-on, triple-checked her boarding pass, and bolted out the door. After a cramped ride on the subway, she finally arrived at JFK. The terminal bustled with its usual cacophony travelers, sprinting to gates announcements echoing overhead, and the underlying hum of thousands of footsteps on polished floors. She clutched her carry-on, mentally rehearsing her schedule. If all went smoothly, she'd just make it before boarding. Started. She tried to push away a creeping anxiety that something might go terribly wrong. Everyone around her seemed equally stressed, from the father juggling 2 toddlers and a stroller to the businesswoman speed-walking while on a conference call. Michaela reminded herself that all she had to do was pass through security, find her gate, and stay patient. She was an experienced traveler, having flown back and forth to Atlanta often enough, yet as she handed her ID to the TSA officer, an uneasy prickle along her spine refused to fade. Nervous anticipation, a premonition. She couldn't quite name it. Little did she know this sense of dread was more than just travel nerves. She was about to become the central figure in an encounter that would ripple beyond her own life and ignite broader discussions about power, authority, and the courage to speak up when something is undeniably wrong. After clearing security and wincing as she heard the overhead call for her flight's final boarding group, Michaela sprinted through Terminal 4. She found Gate 14 breathless and sweating, relieved to see the plane wasn't finished boarding. A crowd of weary passengers waited in scattered rows, half listening for announcements. She settled into a seat, exhaling in relief. A glance at her phone showed a new text from her aunt in Atlanta. "We're at the hospital now. Hang in there?" Michaela typed a quick reply. "On time so far. Love you," and stuffed the phone into her jacket pocket. She glanced around, noticing a young mother struggling to hold a toddler and a diaper bag while rummaging for boarding passes. The boy's wails cut through the background noise, setting more than a few fellow travelers on edge. Michaela, by nature, offered to help. She rose, approached softly, and asked the mother if she needed an extra hand. The woman looked up, eyes rimmed with fatigue, and nodded gratefully. So Michaela crouched next to the toddler, who seemed mostly upset by the unfamiliar environment. "It's okay, little man," she said gently. "Let's see if we can find you something to distract you." Her calm voice momentarily soothed him, and the mother introduced herself as Sandra. She explained she was traveling alone to see her family in Atlanta. She had her hands full. Her husband was supposed to join but got called away for work. Michaela recognized that same anxious energy swirling around them, both the rush to get home to loved ones, the fear of missing the flight. A flight attendant announced the next boarding group. Sandra realized she was up, but her stroller was still folded against a wall nearby, and she couldn't manage it alongside her frantic child. Without hesitation, Michaela offered to bring the stroller over for her. Sandra thanked her profusely. Yet in the midst of all this, Michaela stepped a few feet beyond the usual waiting area, past a retractable belt stanchion that roped off the immediate boarding line. She didn't think twice. People often ducked under or stepped around these barriers just to help each other out. But unbeknownst to her, a watchful eye was on her. Officer Kyle. Nielsen had been with the Port Authority Police Department for 7 years. He carried himself with a certain rigid confidence, often scanning the crowds for anything amiss. That day he was stationed near Gate 14, one of many scattered across JFK. The directive was routine: remain vigilant for suspicious activity, especially near busy flights. He noticed Michaela the moment she arrived. Something about her hurried movements must have caught his attention, or perhaps it was simply that people crossing stanchion boundaries triggered his suspicion. He had no context for Michaela's helpful gesture. From his vantage, he only saw a passenger ignoring the barrier. Approaching with a stern expression, he cleared his throat and barked, "Ma'am, step back behind the line." Michaela, mid-motion in helping Sandra with her stroller, looked up in surprise. She offered the officer a friendly, if puzzled, smile. "Oh, sorry, I was just helping with the stroller. We're both boarding soon." To Nielsen, her response sounded evasive. He was used to people giving quick excuses. "You can't cross this area without permission," he snapped, eyeing her in a way that made her heart quicken. "It's a restricted zone. Unless you're pre-approved." Sandra chimed in, nervously adjusting her crying toddler on her hip. "She was only helping me, officer. I'm in the next boarding group and—" But Nielsen's focus remained on Michaela. His gaze flickered between her face and her carry-on. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from this area immediately." Michaela's pulse thudded in her ears. She guessed he might be having a bad day, or was just overly rigid about policy. She maintained a calm tone. "Sure, I'll move back. I'm sorry if it caused confusion." An uneasy hush fell over the nearby passengers who noticed the exchange. Many looked away, not wanting to get involved. A few began filming on their phones, as social media had taught people to do when law enforcement started raising voices. Sandra, now more flustered than ever, tried to gather her things. Had Officer Nielsen stopped there, it might have been just an awkward moment. But as Michaela turned to give Sandra back her stroller, the tension inexplicably spiked. Nielsen took a step forward, his presence looming, and latched onto Michaela's forearm tighter than any routine security check warranted. Michaela felt the officer's grip tighten around her arm. An immediate jolt of alarm flashed through her. Fear prickled the back of her neck. She wasn't resisting or refusing to comply. She was simply returning Sandra's stroller and stepping back. Yet this man had seized her as if she were committing a crime. "Hey," she managed voice, wavering between calm and alarm. "That's not necessary. I said I'd step back." Officer Nielsen's jaw clenched, repositioned himself as if bracing for a physical struggle. "I told you to comply," he growled, "and you started moving in the wrong direction." Sandra reached out, a pleading hand carefully minding her toddler. "Please, officer, she's not doing anything wrong. We're all just trying to board," one of the gate agents, An older man named Carlos tried to intervene. "Officer, she's a ticketed passenger," he said, scanning Michaela's boarding pass. "We have no issue with her, if you can just let her." Nielsen cut him off, maintaining his hold on Michaela's arm. "Step back, sir," he ordered the gate agent. The tension soared. People in the waiting area stood frozen, uncertain whether to continue boarding or watch the drama unfolding before them. Michaela felt her heart pounding. Like a drum, she'd encountered police before usually benign interactions, like subway safety checks. Never had she been grabbed like a criminal. "Officer," she tried again, controlling the quake in her voice. "You're hurting my arm. I'm not resisting. Please let go." But the look in Nielsen's eyes was resolute, his grip unyielding. A swirl of thoughts flooded Michaela's mind. The fear of missing her flight, the panic that an innocent mistake had somehow escalated, and beneath it all a surge of anger at the injustice. Why was he treating her this way? The overhead speaker droned, "Final boarding call for Delta Flight 407 to Atlanta." A notice to all passengers in the area, now overshadowed by the confrontation. The seconds stretched. Michaela could feel each beat of her heart echoing against her ribs. She locked eyes with Nielsen, searching for any sign of reason. All she found was rigid authority and mounting suspicion. He tugged on her arm to pull her away from Sandra. The toddler squealed in fresh alarm, and Sandra's eyes went wide. Michaela, nearly stumbling, twisted her body to avoid falling. People were filming now, phone cameras trembling in hands, capturing every second. That was when Michaela's patience snapped, not with aggression, but with unwavering self-protection. She steadied her feet, squared her shoulders, and in a voice clearer than she'd ever used to address law enforcement, she said, "Officer, stand down." The hush that followed was immediate. It was a phrase that rarely came from a civilian, much less from a young black woman speaking to a uniformed officer in a busy airport gate. A collective intake of breath rippled through the crowd. Nielsen froze. His grip loosened for a fraction of a second, as if her words had struck a nerve. Surprise glinted in his eyes. It was as though for an instant he didn't know how to react to a direct command thrown back at him, but pride, or perhaps fear of losing control, lit a new spark in him. "Are you giving orders to me?" he snarled, regaining his iron hold on her arm. "You don't order an officer to stand down." "That's not how this works," Michaela's pulse thrummed. She felt the boundary of reason slip further away. "Then check my boarding pass, talk to the gate agent, whatever you need. But don't put your hands on me like I'm a threat." Nielsen stared at her for a full second longer, something unreadable passing over his face. Then, in a burst of momentum, he forced her arm behind her back. The immediate pain wrenched a gasp from Michaela's lungs. Outrage rippled through the watching crowd, and Sandra cried out, "Stop!" Michaela's mind raced. She was no stranger to stories of unjust use of force, but living it firsthand was an entirely different experience. She felt every nerve in her body fire with both terror and raw indignation. The cameras filming made her acutely aware that her ordeal was not happening in a vacuum. There would be evidence, some measure of accountability. Yet at that very moment, accountability felt distant. The gate area erupted into confusion. A few passengers demanded that Nielsen let her go. One or two even stepped closer, though they hesitated to physically intervene. The gate agent Carlos tried to keep the line moving, but no one wanted to board, while a potential assault was unfolding, only steps away. Nielsen's voice rose, commanding onlookers to stay back. "This is a matter of airport security," he barked. "Anyone interfering will be detained for obstruction." Michaela swallowed hard, a swirl of emotions strangling her thoughts. She had come here simply to fly home to see her grandmother. How had it come to this? She had never imagined that stepping beyond a stanchion rope to help someone would trigger such a dangerous spiral. Sandra, tears streaking her face, desperately tried to explain to another uniformed figure who arrived, a female officer with Rios on her nameplate. She was just helping me. He's going too far. The toddler still in Sandra's arms wailed uncontrollably. Officer Rios approached, a mixture of concern and wariness on her face. She put a hand on Nielsen's shoulder. "Kyle enough," she said, her tone urgent but measured. "We need to de-escalate. She's got a ticket." "She's not resisting." Nielsen, breathing heavily, seemed caught between doubling down or listening to his partner. He kept Michaela's arm pinned painfully, his own posture rigid, as if expecting her to fight back. But Michaela, tears forming at the corners of her eyes, refused to give him the satisfaction of panic. The tension hovered thick as concrete. Rios gently but firmly guided Nielsen's arm. "Let me talk to her," she said, throwing him a meaningful look. For a moment, Michaela thought reason might prevail. But then she felt cold metal snap around her wrist. Handcuffs. That single telltale click changed everything once more. Michaela winced as the cuff tightened around her wrist, cutting off circulation if she so much as flexed her hand. The humiliating sensation of being restrained in front of strangers flooded her with both anger and shame. She locked eyes with Officer Nielsen, a look of disbelief crossing her features. "Why are you arresting me?" she demanded. "I didn't do anything wrong." Nielsen kept a stoic front. "You refused a lawful command and were moving in a restricted area. That's enough for a detainment." Officer Rios, caught in the middle, tried to intervene. "Kyle, I'm not sure." "We do this by the book." Nielsen snapped his frustration, turning on his partner as well. She was non-compliant, crossing a barrier, possibly interfering with airport operations. Michaela almost laughed in sheer exasperation. Interfering with airport operations. She was holding a stroller, for heaven's sake. However, any attempt to laugh was smothered by the press of the cuff. She felt panic clenching her chest. The images of all too many injustices flashed through her mind. Sandra, her voice trembling, addressed Officer Rios. "She's innocent. I have the videos. Please! He's hurting her for no reason." Rios nodded, her eyes darting between the passengers recording the scene and Nielsen's unwavering stance. She pressed her lips together, struggling to maintain composure in front of the crowd. "Mom, we'll sort this out," she told Sandra and Michaela. "Let's move this away from the boarding area." The gate agent seized the opportunity to move passengers along, shouting, "Anyone with boarding pass groups 3 and 4, please board now." Many hurried away, relieved to escape the chaos, some still filming over their shoulders. Michaela found herself, gently but firmly, maneuvered toward a quiet alcove near the windows, out of the direct traffic flow. Her heart thundered. She had heard the final boarding call for her flight. Unless this was resolved in minutes, she'd miss her plane. And missing her plane meant leaving her grandmother waiting alone in a hospital bed. At the edge of her vision, she saw Sandra standing with her toddler, still filming. The mother's tear-stricken face radiated sympathy and outrage. Michaela felt a rush of gratitude that someone was documenting this. She refused to let the tears in her eyes fall. She wouldn't appear defeated, even if her hands were cuffed. Officer Rios took a measured step forward. She gestured for Nielsen to give her space. "I'll handle the questioning. Go call for backup or talk to the gate agent." Her tone was firm enough that Nielsen finally backed off a few steps, though his glare stayed fixed on Michaela. Rios began, "Mom, can I see your boarding pass, please?" Michaela tried to raise her hand, but the cuffs prevented normal movement. She winced. "It's in my jacket pocket," My name is Michaela Brown, and I'm on Delta Flight 407 to Atlanta. I'm only here because my grandmother is seriously ill. Rios carefully extracted the boarding pass from Michaela's pocket, scanning it. It's valid, she murmured. Then she glanced at Michaela's ID also. In the same pocket, your ID checks out. You have no outstanding warrants or anything of the sort. Michaela let out a shaky breath. She might have expected them to find a reason, any reason to justify this force. But everything was in order. Rios seemed relieved that there was no sign of actual wrongdoing. Officer Michaela asked, her voice steady, despite the fear. Please tell me what I did to deserve this treatment. Rios lowered her gaze for a moment, as if weighing how much she should admit. You were in an area beyond a stanchion. Officer Nielsen apparently believed you were crossing into a secure zone without authorization. When you didn't step back immediately, he viewed that as non-compliance. Things escalated too quickly. She studied Michaela's face. We'll figure out how to proceed. But for now, you're being detained. Michaela echoed bitterly. For all of that, you put me in handcuffs. Rios seemed genuinely regretful. This is not standard protocol. Let's just say it's complicated. Maybe if we could get your statement. Just then, Nielsen returned phone still in his hand, as though he'd been making a call. We have to move her, he told Rios. She's interfering with airport security. We'll finish this at the substation. Michaela felt dread coil in her gut. The substation, a dreaded place in the airport's labyrinth, was where detained individuals were taken for formal processing. If she ended up there, she'd definitely miss her flight, and who knows what else would happen behind closed doors. Rios looked torn, Kyle. I think it might be best if we let her board after a quick verification. The gate agent can confirm her ticket, and we do not owe her special treatment. Nielsen interrupted, voice rising. This is exactly the problem. She disobeyed a direct order. She can talk all she wants at the substation. A flash of desperation flared in Michaela's eyes. She had never felt so close to losing control of her own fate. She tried to meet Rios's gaze, hoping for a shred of understanding. If reason didn't prevail soon, she'd be hauled off like a criminal, with no guarantee of making it to Atlanta to see her grandmother. Before the situation could spiral further, Sandra stepped forward, toddler clinging to her neck. She was flanked by a small group of fellow passengers, 2 men and a woman, who had been filming. Clearly they'd chosen not to board, despite the final calls, unwilling to abandon Michaela to her fate. Sandra's voice trembled with conviction. Officer, I have the entire thing on video. She was helping me with my stroller and my child. She didn't cross any security boundary that wasn't already open for boarding. This is a public area. Why are you treating her like a criminal? One of the men chimed in. I got a clear shot, too, from the moment the officer grabbed her arm. She wasn't resisting, she was just startled. Nielsen's eyes flickered with frustration, shifting from Sandra to the phone screens. Public scrutiny was the last thing he wanted, especially from multiple angles. Ma'am, sir, he said, tone clipped. I need you to step back and allow us to handle our procedures. But Sandra stood her ground. We're not stepping anywhere until we know Michaela is treated fairly. I'll show everyone on social media what's happening if you keep manhandling her. Rios tried to calm the moment. Okay, let's not escalate. We can settle this without back off, Nielsen snapped at Sandra. He then turned to Rios. We're taking her. That's final. Michaela felt the last sliver of hope slipping. She glanced at the clock above the gate. The plane would be pushing back any minute. She might lose this chance to see her grandmother, not to mention face potential charges for something that made no sense at all. Yet the presence of these bystanders, Sandra and the others refusing to let an injustice pass, kindled a spark within her. She realized she wasn't alone. This wasn't happening in some deserted corner with no witnesses. People were speaking up. Rios held up a palm. If she's truly done nothing wrong, we can do a quick verification check on video surveillance and let her board. Let's do that. Kyle, otherwise we'll have a problem on our hands. We might see these videos surfacing online in minutes, if they haven't already. Nielsen's eyes narrowed. For a moment, Michaela feared he would ignore all reason. Then, in grudging acceptance, he gave a curt nod. Fine. But she stays cuffed until we confirm everything. The group moved toward a side hallway, away from the main gate traffic, with Rios taking the lead, while Nielsen walked behind Michaela. Passengers still watched, phones in hand, uncertain if they should follow. Sandra refused to budge, staying close as a witness, while the gate agent Carlos hurried behind, worried that a fiasco in his section would reflect badly on him. A short walk down the corridor led them to a windowless security office, cramped and cluttered with monitors. Another officer on duty gave them a puzzled look as they entered. Rios quickly explained they needed to review camera footage from Gate 14 to clarify the situation. Nausea churned in Michaela's stomach. She watched the seconds tick by on a digital wall clock. Her flight should be closing the cabin doors any moment. She was losing hope of making it. Grandma? Nielsen stayed, rigid arms folded across his chest. He spoke into his radio, presumably updating a supervisor. Michaela could just make out fragments like, "Found her past the stanchion line." Combative, which made her blood boil. She wanted to shout that he was twisting the facts, but Lisa Michaela's friend and family lawyer had once warned her, "Stay calm in these moments. Everything you say can be used against you." So she bit her tongue. Rios found the relevant camera feed. Grainy footage popped up, showing the gate area from above. There was Michaela crossing the roped boundary, though it was clearly open for boarding. She was bringing a stroller to Sandra. Her posture was relaxed, hardly the stance of someone attempting to breach security. The feed showed Nielsen approaching, grabbing her arm. Even on poor camera quality, the harshness of that initial grip was evident. Then came the moment Michaela twisted in surprise, words clearly exchanged, though inaudible to the camera. Finally, it captured him, forcing her against the stanchion, concluding with the arrival of Rios. A hush fell in the tiny office. Sandra squeezed the toddler's hand anxiously. Waiting, Michaela felt adrenaline throb in her temples. This footage vindicated her story, didn't it? Nielsen's face was taut. Rios glanced at him, then at Michaela. She spoke quietly. "This doesn't look like a security threat. She's assisting a passenger, Kyle. You might have misread the situation." Nielsen scowled, shifting his weight. She disregarded a direct command and refused to comply. "That's enough to take her in." Michaela finally snapped. "I complied. As soon as you explained. You grabbed me before I could even respond." Silence. The other officer monitoring the desk coughed, seeming uneasy. Sandra, never shy, pressed the matter. "So can we let her go now? She's going to miss her flight, and she's done nothing to warrant arrest." Rios studied Nielsen as if waiting for him to make the next call. The tension felt like a live wire. One word from Nielsen could send Michaela off to a holding cell, or if reason prevailed, free her to catch her plane. Their eyes locked. Michaela saw a swirl of conflicting emotions, embarrassment, anger, perhaps even fear of repercussions. Moments seemed to stretch into an eternity, but in reality, only a minute or two passed. Finally, Nielsen grunted a short, frustrated sound. He looked at Rios. "Fine." "Remove the cuffs." Rios stepped forward, retrieving a small key from her belt. The metallic click sounded loud in the cramped room. Michaela's shoulders slumped in relief as the cuff snapped open. Blood rushed back into her wrist, which showed bright red imprints of the metal's pressure. "Thank you," she managed, swallowing the lump in her throat. She resisted the urge to rub her wrist too visibly. She didn't want to appear weak. "Now, if we're done, I need to get to my gate." Nielsen started to speak, likely to hold her for more questioning, but Rios spoke over him. "Your flight might already be closed." "Ms. Brown, I'll radio the gate agent to see if they can hold the door a moment longer." Carlos, the gate agent, piped up with a nervous smile. "I can do that from here. Let me see what I can do." He grabbed his walkie-talkie, stepping aside to coordinate with the boarding desk. Sandra exhaled a shaky breath, relief washing over her features. She balanced her restless child in one arm and gave Michaela's hand a supportive squeeze. "I hope you make it. I'm so sorry this happened." Nielsen, face grim, turned away to busy himself with something at the desk. Perhaps he was logging the incident, or maybe avoiding the awkwardness of it all. Michaela watched him, a brew of anger and sadness roiling in her gut. She hadn't chosen this confrontation, but she wasn't about to walk away quietly, as though it never happened. Her grandmother's situation was urgent, but so was the principle at stake. Carlos returned with a thumbs up. "They're holding the plane for a couple more minutes. Let's get you over there now." Before leaving, Michaela looked at Nielsen. She wanted to say something, a parting shot, about how he had no right to handle people like that. But she decided it wasn't worth risking further delay. Instead, she turned to Rios. "Thank you for checking the footage." Rios nodded, regret etched into her features. "I'm sorry for the trouble. If you want to file a complaint or anything, just let me know." Michaela nodded, lips pressed thinly, and then she left with Carlos and Sandra in tow. The toddler was quiet now, sensing the shift in tension. The hallway seemed longer than before, every step weighted by the knowledge that life wouldn't be the same after that confrontation. By the time Michaela reached gate 14, again her heart pounded from both stress and the hurried pace. A handful of latecomers were darting onto the jet bridge. She could see the flight attendants glancing around, anxious to close the door. She turned to Sandra, who was also on the same flight to Atlanta. "Let's get you on first," Michaela said, reaching for the stroller again. "You have enough to worry about." Sandra smiled wearily. "Let's just get on this plane together, and we can breathe once we're in the air." A wave of relief washed through Michaela as they handed their boarding passes to the attendant. For a moment, everything felt almost normal, like two passengers just trying to catch a flight. But normalcy was shattered by the sting in Michaela's wrist, the memory of Nielsen's grip, and the looming possibility of lodging an official complaint. They stepped onto the plane. The pressurized cabin air hit them like a warm gust. The flight attendant at the door smiled politely, though her expression flickered with curiosity at Michaela's shaken appearance. She offered help to Sandra, with her toddler guiding them to their seats. Michaela found her own seat near the back of the plane and collapsed into it. She placed her carry-on under the seat in front of her hands, trembling with residual adrenaline. A wave of emotion threatened to overwhelm her: relief at being on the plane, anger at Nielsen's manhandling, fear about what might have happened if Rios hadn't intervened. As the plane taxied away from the gate, Michaela closed her eyes. She tried to gather herself, focusing on her breathing. She needed to be strong. Her grandmother depended on her. But she also made a silent vow. She wouldn't let this go. She'd seen too many news stories about abuses of authority, dismissed as necessary force, that couldn't happen here. Just before powering down her phone, she sent a quick text to her cousin, on plane. "Barely made it. Will call when I land. Love you." Then, with trembling hands, she pressed the phone's power button, her mind already churning with what to do next. High above the clouds, Michaela sat in cramped economy, seating trying to calm her pounding heart. The flight attendants delivered safety announcements, then began the usual beverage service, but none of the routine motions could erase the memory of having been forcibly restrained. She stared out the window at the horizon. White plumes of clouds drifted below, tinted gold by the evening sun. Normally, she found flying peaceful a time to read or catch a nap. Today, all she felt was tension. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Nielsen's glare or felt his grip. A faint chime indicated it was safe to move about the cabin. Sandra walked down the aisle, toddler in tow, and paused at Michaela's row. The child was calmer now, half asleep on Sandra's shoulder. "You okay?" Sandra asked gently. Michaela forced a small smile. "I'll be fine. More worried about what just happened, and if it'll come back to haunt me later." Sandra shook her head in dismay. "It was so unnecessary. I have videos, you know. My phone's full of them, and I know other people recorded. If you need them for anything, let me know." Michaela's eyes warmed with gratitude. "Thank you. I think I'll need them. I'm not letting this go unchallenged." Sandra nodded. "I'll email them to you when we land. We need to stand up for ourselves in moments like these." Michaela agreed. She gave Sandra her contact info and watched as the mother returned to her seat near the front. The rest of the flight passed in tense reflection. While the seatbelt sign glowed sporadically due to mild turbulence, Michaela's mind churned with a plan. She would consult a lawyer. Her father's friend was a civil rights attorney in Atlanta. She'd gather all footage, file a complaint with the Port Authority Police Department's internal affairs. If that didn't yield results, she'd go public. A sense of steeled resolve settled over her. She pictured her grandmother's reassuring smile, the look of love in her eyes. If anything, this ordeal only renewed Michaela's determination to fight for what was right. She exhaled, leaning back against the seat, refusing to be intimidated by what had happened. The plane touched down at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport later that evening. Michaela felt a rush of relief. She always loved that moment when wheels hit tarmac and the flight attendant welcomed everyone to her hometown. This time, though, it came laced with lingering stress. As she exited the jet bridge, she saw her cousin Gerald waiting in the arrivals area, scanning the crowd. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 20s, wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, looking for Michaela with anxious eyes. When he spotted her, his face broke into a worried grin. "You made it," Gerald said, pulling her into a tight hug. "We were so scared you'd get delayed." Michaela pressed her forehead against his shoulder, momentarily hiding her trembling eye. Almost was she admitted. Something terrible happened at JFK. Gerald's expression darkened with concern. "Tell me everything. When we get to the hospital," Auntie said, "Grandma's stable, but she's anxious to see you." Michaela nodded, feeling tears prick her eyes. Seeing her grandmother was the only thing that mattered now. If she'd been whisked off to some airport holding cell, she might have missed this chance. They wove through the crowd to the parking deck, Gerald carrying her bag during the short drive to the hospital. Michaela recounted the horrifying details, the cop's sudden aggression, the handcuffs, the last-minute release. Gerald kept shaking his head, knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. "That's messed up. You know we can't let that slide." "I already got video from a witness," Michaela said. "You better believe I'm filing a complaint, good." Gerald muttered, "Good." When they arrived at the hospital, the sterile smell and fluorescent lights surrounded them, a stark contrast to the chaotic terminal from earlier. Michaela's mother, Loretta, met them in the hallway outside her grandmother's room, her face lined with worry. The moment Michaela locked eyes with her mother, she burst into tears, both from relief and pent-up emotion. Loretta hugged her daughter close, whispering, "It's okay. I'm here, Grandma's stable, but we need you." Michaela sniffled, nodded, and prepared herself to step into the room. She would deal with the police matter soon enough. For now, she had to be strong for the woman who helped raise her. The next day, after spending hours comforting her grandmother, Michaela found a quiet moment in the hospital hallway to make calls. She spoke with her father's old friend, Lisa Merriweather, a seasoned civil rights attorney based in downtown Atlanta. Lisa listened calmly to Michaela's account, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "We have video evidence," Michaela said firmly. "Multiple angles from different people's phones." Lisa responded with cool professionalism. "That's excellent. I strongly recommend we file an official complaint with the Port Authority Police Department. Simultaneously, we can prepare a civil suit if they don't take action." Michaela felt a weight lift from her chest. She had a plan. Yes, let's do that. Over the next few days, as her grandmother began to stabilize, Michaela gathered everything she needed. Sandra sent over the videos and put her in contact with other witnesses. Gerald helped her compile them into a single folder. Lisa prepared the paperwork for an official complaint. Michaela debated whether to go public on social media. Immediately, part of her wanted to share the footage to shine a light on the injustice. But Lisa cautioned restraint. "Let's see how they respond first. If they stonewall us, then we can release it to the press." The days blurred into a whirlwind of hospital visits, legal prep, and quiet moments at her grandmother's bedside. Each time her grandmother woke, she asked for details about Michaela's trip, though her mother had shielded the older woman from the full story to avoid unnecessary stress. Michaela only told her grandmother a simplified version. "There was a problem at the airport, but I'm handling it." Deep in her heart, Michaela felt a growing resolve. This wasn't just about her own humiliation. It was about a pattern she knew existed, a pattern of authority sometimes being abused. She wanted to stand for herself, and in a small way for others who lacked the resources to do so. She refused to let her grandmother's granddaughter become another name in a long list of unaddressed complaints. Within a week, Michaela was back at JFK, but this time not to travel. She'd returned with Lisa to meet with a representative from the Port Authority Police Department's Internal Affairs Division. They had set up the meeting in a nondescript office building attached to the airport complex, away from the bustling terminals. Michaela's nerves flared the moment she stepped inside. The fluorescent-lit corridors reminded her of that cramped security office. She inhaled, squared her shoulders, and clutched a folder containing printouts of witness statements. Seated across from them was Lieutenant Brandon Hall, a tall, lean man in his 50s who wore a suit rather than a patrol uniform. His demeanor was politely formal. He opened the conversation. "I've reviewed your initial complaint, Ms. Brown, and understand you have video evidence." "We take such matters seriously." Lisa arched an eyebrow, scanning for any sign of insincerity. "We appreciate your time, Lieutenant. We have multiple video recordings from different angles. They show Officer Kyle Nielsen using force disproportionate to the situation, handcuffing Ms. Brown without valid cause." Hall nodded, steepling his fingers. "We'll begin a formal investigation. If the allegations are substantiated, disciplinary actions will follow." Michaela spoke up, her voice steadier than she felt. "I just want accountability. The way he handled me was wrong, and the footage is clear. They spent the next hour walking through the timeline, presenting all relevant evidence." Hall asked pointed questions, occasionally scribbling notes. Michaela was relieved to see that at least on the surface the department didn't appear dismissive. Yet at the end of the meeting, Hall offered a caution. Officer Nielsen has been with us for 7 years and has an otherwise clean record. We'll need to gather statements from him, his partner, and any other witnesses. I can't guarantee the outcome, but we will follow the procedure thoroughly. Michaela left the meeting with mixed emotions, hope tempered by the reality that police investigations often favored their own. Lisa assured her that if the internal review failed to act, they could pursue a lawsuit. Michaela nodded, determined to see this through, no matter how long it took. Just as Lisa had predicted, the internal investigation, dragged on weeks, turned into a month, with no definitive word on Nielsen's status. Michaela went about her life, splitting time between New York and Atlanta to care for her grandmother while anxiously awaiting an update. She was determined not to let the matter be swept under the rug. Then one day, Gerald called. "Kay, have you looked at Twitter today?" Her heart skipped a beat. "No. Why, it's blowing up. Looks like someone posted a clip of you getting cuffed. It's going viral." Michaela's stomach lurched. She'd known this could happen. She raced to check social media. Sure enough, a 30-second clip filmed from one of the passengers' phones showed Nielsen seizing her arm and pushing her against the stanchion, all while she repeated, she was only helping a mother bored. The final seconds captured the moment she shouted, "Stand down," followed by Nielsen forcing her arm behind her back. Within hours, the hashtag, #YashuStandDownOfficer, began trending regionally. People demanded answers, pointing to this as yet another example of unjust aggression. National news outlets picked up the story. Journalists reached out to Michaela's social media accounts, seeking interviews. Lisa advised caution. "If we speak publicly, let's do it with a clear statement. A press conference might be premature until we see how internal affairs responds. But we can't ignore this momentum. Public pressure can force accountability." Michaela found herself in the eye of a social media storm, balancing calls from family messages, of support from strangers, and yes, hateful comments from trolls. Still, the outpouring of solidarity reminded her she wasn't alone. She did a short interview with a local news station, carefully stating the facts. She expressed her wish for a thorough investigation and a genuine apology. Nielsen's name soon surfaced in press reports, and rumors circulated he'd been placed on administrative leave. The Port Authority Police Department issued a brief statement acknowledging an investigation without revealing details. The media demanded more. The public wanted justice. In the midst of the maelstrom, Michaela visited her grandmother, who was recuperating well. The older woman held her hand, a knowing gleam in her eye. "You always did speak your mind," she said softly. "I'm proud of you for not letting fear hush you." Michaela choked back tears. "I'm doing this for all of us. Grandma, I won't let him get away with it." Weeks later, the official findings emerged. The Port Authority Police Department concluded that Officer Nielsen had used excessive force without proper justification. His failure to communicate effectively and his immediate resort to force violated the department's protocols. He was suspended without pay for 6 months, mandated to undergo retraining, and a permanent mark was placed on his record. Michaela learned the news through Lisa, who read from the official letter. "They're not firing him, but this is significant discipline." Lisa explained, "Most officers in these cases get a slap on the wrist. A suspension and mandatory retraining is a serious consequence." Michaela exhaled, relief mingled with lingering dissatisfaction. Part of her felt he deserved to be removed from duty entirely. Yet she recognized how rarely police departments actually imposed punitive measures like these. Perhaps it would at least deter him from targeting another innocent person. She decided to proceed with a civil lawsuit. Nielsen's actions had caused her emotional distress, physical pain, and potential reputational harm. The video evidence and the department's own findings gave her a strong case. A settlement offer arrived soon, presumably to avoid a lengthy trial and further publicity. After discussions with Lisa Michaela, negotiated a settlement large enough to cover legal fees, therapy costs, and some compensation for her ordeal. Crucially, she refused a gag clause that would have barred her from speaking publicly about the incident. In the end, Michaela accepted the settlement without signing away her voice. She had already become a powerful advocate on social media, using the 我是stand-down officer hashtag to shine a light on the importance of recording interactions with law enforcement, staying calm but resolute and demanding accountability. Officer Nielsen faded from the headlines, serving his suspension in relative obscurity. Perhaps he would emerge with a different perspective, or perhaps not. Karma had caught up with him, at least in part. Meanwhile, Michaela continued with her life, free of the fear that once gripped her. When she flew again out of JFK. Months later, it was with a calmer spirit, and the knowledge that her actions had sparked real change. She never forgot the jarring moment when she commanded him, "Stand down," and how that phrase reverberated far beyond Gate 14. It became a rallying cry for her, and countless others who realized they too could stand up to injustice, even in the face of a uniform and a badge. Injustice can happen anywhere, even in the seemingly routine setting of an airport boarding gate. Michaela's story highlights how a single chilling moment can expose deeper issues of authority and bias. She refused to remain silent, using evidence, legal counsel, and sheer determination to secure accountability. What began with a flight to see her ailing grandmother ended in a ripple effect, sparking conversations, mobilizing social media support, and reminding people everywhere that an abuse of power doesn't have to stand unchallenged. If you found her journey inspiring, please share this video with friends or on your social platforms. Your engagement amplifies the call for fair treatment and transparency, whether at airports, on city streets, or beyond. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated on stories that shine a light on truth and justice. Together, we can ensure that the next stand down resounds louder than ever.